Good evening, I'm John Carter and welcome to Poland Daily. The celebrations of the 20th anniversary of the accession of Poland, along with the Czech Republic and Hungary, to NATO, were held today in Prague. The presidents of the three countries attended the celebrations in the Czech capital, along with the Slovakian president, whose country joined 5 years later. In a speech, President Andrzej Duda summarised Poland's 20-year membership in NATO.
Kiedy ktoś pyta mnie,
when someone asks me why I have talked about the necessity for the physical presence of the NATO forces in Poland, on our Polish soil, this is my reply. For Poles to truly believe in the alliance, one must take into account our historical experiences. Poles need to feel the physical presence of that alliance. I have expressed that since I was the president-elect in 2015 and was asked that very question during various meetings with NATO allies, and first of all with the Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg. And this is why I replied that way. The geopolitical situation which we saw in 2008 and again in 2014 when Russia first invaded Georgia and then Ukraine was clearly reminiscent of old connotations of Russia's imperial policies, of Russia spreading its influence westwards into neighboring countries. Above all, it was reminiscent of an old sphere of influence that I probably don't have to remind anyone here in Prague about. None of our countries want to return to that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we in Poland strongly value NATO.
żaden z naszych krajów wrócić nie chce.
The 20th anniversary of Poland joining NATO has given the country the chance to reflect on the political and military benefits of Poland being part of the alliance. The former Minister of National Defence, Antoni Macierewicz, has made the point that Januszewski's government was a crucial element of this arrangement becoming a reality.
Exactly 20 years ago, on March 12, 1999, Poland formally became a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Efforts to join the most powerful defense alliance in history began in 1991. The government of Januszewski played a key role in Poland joining NATO because he said in his exposé, starting his work as Prime Minister, that joining NATO was the main goal of the foreign policy. Since then, NATO is in Poland. It is not just the case that Poland is in NATO, as it is formally speaking, but above all, Poland has military tools to play a political role in NATO as an alliance that co-shapes our political reality, not only military. That's why for the Olszewski government it was so crucial for Poland to be in NATO first, and only later in the European Union. The former head of the Ministry of Defense, Romuald Szeremietiew, noted that NATO is still able to guarantee the security of its members, and therefore also Poland, and this is a very important matter for us. By participating in this structure, we are also improving our armed forces, our defense system, our thinking about defense, and so there are just so many advantages. Naturally, there are various fears, namely whether and how long the cohesion of NATO can be preserved, or whether the centrifugal tendencies that unfortunately appear and which are clearly favored by Russia will not take over. It can be seen that President Trump is currently fighting a fierce battle for NATO to regain its efficiencies, for instance through NATO member states allocating the right amount of money for NATO defense. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization currently counts 29 member states. This year, the international alliance will be celebrating the 70th anniversary of its establishment. The celebrations will be taking place in Washington, D.C.
The Deputy Prime Minister of Poland, Beata Szydło, has appealed to the teachers' unions today to not go on strike, as Polish teachers are demanding higher salaries. Szydło has promised that the scheduled April exams will take place as planned.
We are the first government to systematically raise teacher salaries. But ladies and gentlemen, we can't do everything we want in such a short time. We only ask this: please give us a chance. Let's sit at the table and have a conversation. Perhaps we will be able to meet some of the demands you presented here today. The process of raising the salaries has, like I said, already begun, and it will be continued. The April exams are our priority, and they will take place. We can't put the youth's future on the line because of the debate between us, the adults, between teachers and politicians. We need to be prepared for any possibility, any circumstances, and that's exactly what's happening. Let me stress this again: the exams will take place. Dear students, don't worry. Continue to prepare for the exams. They will take place as planned.
I tak się między innymi dzieje. Brexit has entered its decisive phase. Today, the House of Commons decides whether the United Kingdom's divorce process with the European Union will be accomplished within the prescribed period, March 29th, or whether the British public will face a further period of uncertainty.
Prime Minister Theresa May argued that the fate of Brexit is uncertain if the government's divorce agreement with the European Union, along with the last-minute amendments, won't be approved by the House of Commons.
It has been 8 weeks since this House held the meaningful vote on the Brexit deal. On that day, Parliament sent a message: the deal needed to change. In response, the government has worked hard to secure an improved deal that responded to the concerns of this House. I took the concerns of this House about the backstop to the EU, sat down with President Juncker and President Tusk.
The head of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, and the British Prime Minister announced that the two documents will be attached to the previously negotiated agreement and political declaration. One of them would help Great Britain in the event of possible international arbitration, while the other would be a joint commitment of both parties to replace the backstop with another solution by 2020. The Labour Party and the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland have announced that they will vote against the proposed backstop. The uncertainty within politics is also impacting on the public.
It seems to me like nobody can make up their mind. Everybody is kind of like, everybody is saying what's wrong with it, but nobody's coming up with any sort of solution. So I don't know. I think there's none of the politicians I trust, to be honest, at the moment.
If the parliamentarians do not support today's agreement, they will decide one day later whether the UK should opt for Brexit without a contract. If such a solution is rejected, on Thursday they will vote on a delay to leave the European Union, which was set for March 29th.
Thank you very much for joining us here this evening at Poland Daily. I'm John Carter. Stay tuned after the break for Poland Daily weather, and that's followed by the business, history, travel and the culture.
Welcome to Poland Daily Weather. Let's see the forecast for tonight. In most regions, sky will be cloudless. Temperature will drop across the Poland. A maximum 1 degree we will see in Katowice. In central Poland, temperature will range about -3 degrees. Overcast sky will appear around Kraków and Katowice. The pressure will be still low. Let's see the forecast for tomorrow. In the whole country, we may accept plenty of sunlight, but with little rainfall. Temperature ranging from 5 degrees in Białystok to 9 in Wrocław and Poznań. The wind will be moderate. Let's check the weather for the next days. On Thursday, little rainfall will appear across the Poland. Pressure will be still low. The highest temperature we'll see on the south with 9 degrees. On Friday, rainfall will stay with us. Temperatures will increase to 10 degrees. On Saturday, temperature will rise to 11 degrees on the southeast, and there we are expected heavy rainfall. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
Poland Daily Business Edition. We are in Kraków and tonight our guest is Rafał Trepka of MasterCard. Sir, welcome to the show.
Welcome, pleasure to meet you.
You are watching the card market from inside, and what are the criteria that you are describing the payment card market in our country?
Sure. Looking from the card perspective, of course, you can divide it from the different perspective. You can look at the cards which are connected with your current account. So we tell about the debit cards. You can also talk about the credit cards, so you can have additional capabilities there. On top of that, Poland is extremely popular market also for contactless cards. So I can very easily pay in a very safe, secure, but very convenient and fast way in a contactless manner. So in Poland today, we have roughly 40 million cards, so a bit over the total number of people who are living here. And on top of that, more than 85% of these cards are already contactless. So what we see in Poland is contactless payments are certainly very, very popular, and also debit MasterCard credit cards as well, including also Maestro, very, very important. Plus, On top of that, when we look from the card perspective, we don't only talk about the face-to-face environment, about brick and mortar retail payments, but actually the whole payment is moving from face-to-face towards through the omni-channel experience as well, towards the e-commerce. So e-commerce is starting a bit more popular. You've asked about the cards. What I can add as well, we talk about the card. It's not only a particular plastic and 16 digits PAN, which is on the card. These cards are actually starting to be, as we call it, emulated in your phone. So you start having a card in your phone, you can tap the phone, you can pay from your mobile with the same experience as you are having face-to-face. So we are starting to have more, let's say, digital wallets experience as well. So that's how the market is moving. Also, that's how the cards are moving.
With all these new technologies you just described, the fraud is also more popular, more accessible. Do you note that the credit card frauds are on the rise?
So looking from that perspective, you could say that there is you have to be more careful while paying online than in the face-to-face environment. In the face-to-face environment, you have more control. You hold the card, as I'm saying, especially in contactless, you hold your card, you pay. So the whole security, besides everything which is in the back-end systems, is much more secure than online. So in online, as I'm saying, generally statistics could say there is a bit more fraud, but therefore there are additional controls while paying online. You have spend controls, you have spend alerts, you have additional notifications, and on top of that, you have additionally authentication while paying online. And especially this authentication, before it was through the, let's call it one-time password, you could receive it through SMS or additional token. Right now we additionally talk about the biometrics. So it can be your maybe face recognition, it can be your fingerprint and others, in order to increase and make this payment as secure as in the face-to-face environment, as I mentioned. We are very happy in the cooperation with the post office and as well with the post bank and also bank acquirers who are behind the whole cooperation, especially now when we are celebrating 460 years of post office in Poland, being here in Krakow. So overall, both with the post office and especially as well with the post bank. If I then deep dive on the cooperation particularly, we can look from the acceptance and payment area. If I look at from the acceptance perspective, we are very happy that already in 2016, post office opened the acceptance at the post. So when I was coming to the branch, I didn't have to hold a lot of cash. I could very easily pay by card in the branch as well. So over 4,000 locations, over 4,500 locations have been equipped with the terminals, over 8,000 terminals on the market. Moreover, what we really also appreciate what the Post has done, and this is a very good educational part as well, Post Office has equipped as well their mobile employees who are delivering parcels to people, and also the Pocztex, the courier company as well of the Post Office. So it's very easy, coming back to your earlier question about online, me as a consumer, maybe I don't trust to the product I'm gonna get, and therefore I decide to pay on delivery. But when the product is delivered, I may not have enough cash. I may not feel comfortable to pay cash when the product arrives. So I want to pay by card, but if the courier is not equipped with the terminal, it's very difficult to pay. So therefore, Post Office and Pocztex went a bit farther and equipped their couriers with the terminals as well. We find this very, very useful for the consumers. So that's on the acceptance side. You've also asked about the second part, about when I look at the post bank in Poland, bank pocztowy, it's also looking from we usually look from the consumer perspective, even we are talking about the cooperation with a particular partner. But then it's very easy for the consumers to access their account through the debit card. It's very nice co-branded card between the post bank, bank pocztowy, and the post office directly. And if you look at the colors, matches perfectly. You look at the MasterCard logo, you look at the post bank, it's a very good fit. So besides the colors, it's a very good fit for the consumers, a very good cooperation. So we talk about the debit card. Of course, Postbank also very nicely segments their customers. Some customers need some additional functionalities, so they also have credit card as well. And I mentioned as well about these contactless payments before. Additionally, Postbank issues a smaller sticker where you can have it with the card and pay even easier through the contactless manner. And there are many more projects in pipeline. We will probably come back in the future interviews.
10 years from now, how do you see your company role in this online market, and how will be the shape of these transactions?
It would be great to have a crystal ball to predict the future, but there are certainly some areas which are very important to secure and to stay. So whenever we look from the payment perspective, I will talk about the payment directly, safety and security will certainly stay there. However we will pay, whether it will be still a physical card or it will be card in the mobile, it will be particular mobile phone. As I'm saying, this safety, security, not only convenience, will be extremely important. As we see, the world is converging from physical to the more online and mobile. So certainly, and when we see on the uprising trend, we will see more and more mobile payments, or how I'm serving everything through mobile. The whole Internet of Things is growing. So we talk about the different devices. Different devices can become the acceptance devices as well. So from one side, people will be paying maybe through the different devices, still through MasterCard, which is being tokenized there, on the different devices too.
Sir, thank you very much for the conversation. Rafał Trepka of MasterCard was our guest, and eternal question remains to be answered. The ancient Phoenicians invented the money, but why so few? That's it for this part of the show. Thank you very much, and that was it for Poland Daily Business Tonight.
Thank you very much. Pleasure talking to you.
Welcome back to Poland Daily Weather. Let's take a look at the forecast for tomorrow. In the whole country, we may expect plenty of sunlight, but with little rainfall. Temperatures ranging from 5 degrees in Białystok to 9 in Wrocław and Poznań. The wind will be moderate. Let's take a look at the forecast for tomorrow for our continent. In the Balkans, temperature will range about 22 degrees. On the South Europe, temperature will little drop to 16 in Madrid and 15 in Lisbon. In British Islands, rainfall is expected. Snowfall will appear in Scandinavia, and there the temperature will increase to 3 degrees in Oslo and Stockholm. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Hello, we're beginning our next episode of Poland Daily Art in Palace, on an island. Welcome everybody, my name is Marcin Bąk.
Marcin Bąk I Janusz Janowski. Skoro jesteśmy w tak.
Because we are now in a beautiful classicist palace, not only when it comes to the architecture, but also the decorative art, we should talk about the next era in the history of art. This time, classicism. We always talk about the spiritual side of the era, so I think we should show the spiritual side of classicism as well. We indicated many times that matter is always ahead of the spirit. Some sort of transformation inside happens before someone takes a brush or sculptural chisel into his hand, or thinks of a plan of a palace or a garden. And it happens with masonry in the 18th century, of which we've already talked when we discussed other eras. And we have to talk about masonry today because it plays a huge role in this particular era. Indeed, let us remind ourselves that in 1776, so in the year which is celebrated as the official beginning of the United States nationhood, at that time a famous secret association called the Illuminati was established. And this spiritual intellectual trend was extremely enveloping. We can say that it was the trend of secret associations that began then, and it has had a huge influence, if not practically, at least in our own minds. We know that a section has functioned in Poland since 1727. We also know that many dignitaries, and not only representatives of the court, but also of the episcopate, were involved.
Co może być pewną zagadką, tak jak?
This can be a big enigma. Priests and bishops started to join the Masonry.
Szeregi masonów. Konstytucja 3 maja.
The May 3rd Constitution was formed by people connected to the Masonry. So the classicist trend has a huge impact on it, and it decides about the era's shape, its formation. The name classicism itself, in Latin, classicismum, is a perfect pattern. It should also somehow lead us to these spiritual thoughts. In Immanuel Kant's Ethics, we see a duty that brings to a certain, or leads to a certain kind of moralizing. One could say that it leads to a certain dependence on the state system. In the end, it will later be developed by Hegel, which will lead us to the apotheosis of the state. Yes, but the Kantian ethics say that you have to be an ethical, humble, and devoted man. But not without reason. Kant and Hegel are Prussian.
Tak jest, i pruscy, i protestanccy, z ducha. Przy czym Hegel, jak wiemy...
Both Prussian and Protestant. Hegel, as we know, was involved in being able to become a pastor. He was deeply attached to all of this. However, classicism, as I mentioned, and David's oath of the Horatia painting is born when the French Revolution was being prepared. Well, that can sound inadequate, especially to some specialists, but it was born of great emotion.
Zrodziła się z emocji.
Yes, allegedly the Parisian people, following an impulse, initiated the revolution. But before that, the encyclopedists were slowly writing their texts.
Powolutku pisali sobie różne teksty. Fryderyk II, czyli król filozof.
Let's look at Frederick II, a philosopher king who has an impact on this topic as well. Classicism also becomes the first trend in the field of art that could be described as propaganda, because the oath of the Horatia painting was conceived in the early 80s of the 18th century. It's just an announcement of the events that happened later. It's some kind of an introduction or preparation of something that we associate with a certain ideological persuasion or a kind of truthful propaganda, if you will. And here it is revealed in classicism. We're talking about classicism, which refers to ancient patterns, which is actually a mythological painting trend. But everything that is presented is a kind of theater detached from life. It is very interesting in combination with Baroque and Rococo. Baroque is the quintessence and emanation of life, and it emphasizes existence as the most momentous act of the world. Rococo was some kind of deception or transformation of this vitality into promiscuity and excess. Classicism breaks with Rococo's excess and with everything that describes Baroque. We talked about the fact that Baroque, as Jesuit art, had to be fought for in this era. Let us remember that in 1773, I believe, we could say, the first partition of Poland, the cassata of Jesuits, of the Jesuit constituency, takes place. And this leads directly to classicism. This trend was established by the cassata of Jesuits. The secret organizations such as Weishaupt's Illuminati or the Encyclopedists was foremost in the thoughts of Frederick II.
Czy Fryderyka Wielkiego II. Voltaire. Tak.
So we're talking about these various trends that characterize this era, the second half of the 18th century and the times of the French Revolution. And I have this impression of such a complete dichotomy, because on one hand, it's all about rejection of the superstitions which Freemasonry is obsessed with, but it's also a total reinterpretation of Christianity. So we could say a completely different look at religion. This is also the time of the canons of the modern science of the 18th century. And on the other hand, it's a time of dealing with an incredible explosion of esoteric practices, the Kabbalah, and various other such things, which claim they can transmute lead into gold, like alchemists, and even invoke the souls of the dead, leading to, we could say, the later movement in spiritualism. So how is it possible that such contradictory trends can coexist with each other, let's say reason and, if you will, unreason at the same time?
Sprzeczne nurty ze sobą współgrają.
Ta sytuacja jest właściwie analogiczna do sytuacji z XVI wieku, o której mówiliśmy.
This situation is analogous to the situation of the 16th century, of which we spoke earlier, because actually the basis of this science was established at the time of Francis Bacon. As we alluded to earlier, intellectuals rejected the perspective of God. Although this is not entirely about the rejection of God in classicism, it is about the changing interpretation of understanding. As I said, the deist vision, sometimes connected with pantheism, provides a basis here. The first thing that happens is one must reject the Holy Trinity. So this is basically a concealed attack on Catholicism, replacing it with another kind of spirituality. And here comes the element that is worth emphasizing, that there is not a complete and total detachment from considering concept of God. The Illuminati was strongly connected to the Jesuit environment. The state destroys the Jesuit method by introducing its secret society into their area. Every Jesuit casuist has their own leader. Leaders which were using the Jesuits in a negative way when they were confessing and also, let's say, writing their journals and diaries.
Każdy jezuita miał swojego prowadzącego, prowadzący dwóch takich adeptów. Ci adepci spowiadali się i pisali pamiętniki, tak by móc, by ich prowadzący mógł...
Meanwhile, Weishaupt did the opposite. The total surveillance, which is the basis of secret societies today, was actually born in the structure of Weishaupt's Bavarian Illuminati. What about that? So we can say this spirituality changes if we look at it in terms of Christianity. Okay, let's say this is a partial answer, because it is also worth paying attention to the fact that there is some kind of sacralization of temporality on the one hand and of matter on the other. This is where pantheism originates. That's where it comes from. Everything is penetrated by the divine soul. So that there is, in the strict sense, an idealization of nature and sacralization of nature, that is, making nature sacred above all things.
Boski, duszę boską, czyli jest idealizacja natury w sensie ścisłym, sakralizowanie tego, co materialne.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Poland Daily History. Today we will speak with Mr. Piotr Jegliński, a member of a prominent Polish patriotic family. From the 1970s, he participated in the anti-communist dissident movement. Having started his own publishing house in Paris, he is responsible for smuggling forbidden literature back to the then communist-occupied Poland. Today, we will ask him about his life and struggle for a free Poland. Mr. Jegliński, I was wondering if you can talk to me a little bit about your formative years and how your family and environment affected you.
Urodziłem się, jestem w ogóle mieszkańcem Warszawy, moja rodzina była.
I was born here in Warsaw in 1951 to a family belonging to the intelligentsia and which had a long tradition of fighting for Polish independence. We used to live in a neighborhood called Friendship. It had been built to house the Soviet workers who had arrived in Warsaw to build the Palace of Culture. Once they left, the buildings in the neighborhood were given to Warsaw University and the Warsaw University of Technology. My father was a research assistant, so we lived there. From early childhood, I was very interested in history. Very often, we would have mysterious guests at home. They would have long discussions that I wasn't allowed to attend, but I would listen in on them, as kids at that age like knowing what their parents are talking about. The topics would usually center on persecutions, the resistance and underground. I remember the year of 1956, the Polish October Revolution, when many mysterious people would show up at our place. They were often people who had been released from Stalinist prisons. My uncle was one of them, who had been on death row in the infamous Mokotów prison. We were also visited by a friend from the Polish Home Army, the official military underground from the Second World War. It was Mr. Henryk Kozłowski, nom de guerre Kmita, who was the last commander of the famous Parasol unit from the Warsaw Uprising. These people and the stories they told had a massive impact on me, and I remember the effect 1956 had on me, the tension present in Poland. Once, some military men arrived at our house and woke us up in the middle of the night. They asked my father to come along and coordinate the civilians who were building anti-tank barricades, because Soviet tanks were at that time preparing an assault on Warsaw. Other memories I had from that year include listening to Radio Free Europe. My parents and grandfather would also listen to underground radio transmissions from Budapest, where the Hungarian anti-Soviet revolution was in full swing. Those transmissions were dramatic. They were asking for help, for the West to send them blood for blood transfusions and so on. That was the atmosphere I grew up in, and in 1957 another person who would appear who shaped me in many ways. It was my uncle, Adam Korwin-Sokołowski, who returned to Poland from political exile. He had served as the chief of staff of Marshal Józef Piłsudski, the legendary interwar leader of Poland. I later published his memoirs. You could say that he was the mentor who shaped my later life. The stories he told me linked my life with the events of the 19th century, particularly the so-called forest bands who waged the guerrilla war on Russia during the 1863-64 January uprising. My uncle, Korwin-Sokołowski, and his two brothers joined Piłsudski before he was even the leader of Poland. Back then, he was simply a revolutionary. All three brothers would become recipients of Virtuti Militari, Poland's highest military decoration for valor on the battlefield. The oldest of his brothers, Zygmunt, would die in battle of December 10, 1918, as Poles and Ukrainians fought for control over the city of Lwów.
Zygmunt poległ 10 grudnia 18 roku, zaledwie w miesiąc po zyskaniu niepodległości pod Lwowem.
Following his patriotic upbringing, Mr. Jegliński chose to attend the Catholic University of Lublin for being the only place at the time to be without Marxist philosophy in its curriculum. We will further explore how the decision ultimately shaped his ideology. So after your very patriotic upbringing, I was wondering if you personally partake in any activities that reflects that kind of upbringing.
Dalej moje życie toczyło się bardzo szybko. Poszedłem do szkoły i
Well, my life sped up after those first years. I started school soon thereafter, and I felt that my family traditions obliged me to do something for my fatherland. So my first expression of dissent as a child was something I would do in class. I would arrive in school before everybody else, and I would make a paper crown that I would attach on top of the head of the eagle on Poland's coat of arms. It used to wear a crown before the Second World War, but the communists had removed it. As I was about to finish high school, me and my parents started thinking about where to continue my studies. We quickly thought that the Catholic University in Lublin would be the best place. We reached that conclusion because it was the only Polish university where they didn't have Marxist philosophy on the curriculum. The principal back then, Father Krompiec, used to say that it was the only university between the River Elbe in East Germany and Vladivostok in Eastern Russia where no Marxist philosophy was taught. So it was an ideological choice for me to study there. The Catholic University of Lublin was an oasis in communist Poland. I'm surprised to this day that the communists allowed it to operate. We really felt like we were free there. Starting from my freshman year, I met a number of wonderful people like Janusz Krupski, who would be my brother-in-arms in the struggle against communism. There was also Bogdan Boruszewicz, who later became one of the leaders of the Solidarity movement. Those were the greatest years of my life. We were students of history and we quickly came to the conclusion that we need to start doing something for our nation. What was lacking back in that grey communist world was access to good sources, especially for us as historians. There were good books published by Poles living in exile. Here in Poland, everything was censored back then. We had access to those books written by Poles abroad, but they could only be found in a special part of the university's library, and you needed a professor's permission to borrow them. Those students who studied contemporary history could receive such a permit. You could say that the most wanted book back then was the third edition of Polish History 1939 to 1945, written by Pobuk Malinowski. One of our friends had a permit to borrow that book. We all shared the book and read it for 2-3 hours per person before passing it on to someone else. We are still thinking about what to do back then. It was just after the dramatic events of the Polish protests of 1970 and Black Thursday. The communist regime had killed 42 protesters along the Baltic shore. The atmosphere was tense, and all students were forced to leave Lublin for a while. We decided to actively oppose the communist regime. I had taken a course in photography, and we decided to publish books using the photographic method of printing. At that time, I received a book sent to me from France. It was written by Professor Janusz Zawodny. The title was Cutting Massacre dans la Forest, or Cutting the Massacre in the Forests. It described how the Soviet Union had killed 25,000 Polish officers in the Katyn massacre during the Second World War and then blamed it on Germany. It was forbidden knowledge at the time that it was the Soviets who were guilty. Me and my friends decided to make a copy of this book. The copy ended up being 15 centimeters thick. It was a brick, to be honest. It was all done in great secrecy, since the secret police would visit our university and look for forbidden materials. The next interesting thing to happen was that we started taking lectures on ethics given by Cardinal Karol Wojtyła. I could have never guessed that this will have a lasting impact on my life, but this was how I came to know Cardinal Wojtyła, who soon would become Pope John Paul II. Soon thereafter, I found out that I had been given a scholarship. The university told me that it had been given to me by a sponsor who wanted to remain anonymous. In the following years, I found out that it had been the Pope who had generously helped me out, but at the time I had no idea who had sponsored my scholarship.
Ja w ogóle nie skojarzyłem sobie, że to chodzi o moje stypendium.
Mr. Jegliński's family, his personal history, and his activities is a perfect reflection of the generation-long struggle for Polish independence. At times, the resistance against foreign powers were fought with weapons in hand, but in other times, it was conducted with the smuggling of printing press and forbidden literature. That's it for today. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. I'll see you next time on Poland Daily History.
Hello and welcome back to Poland Daily Travel. We're glad you tuned in, or we're glad you're watching us on YouTube. Lots of stuff to see. Your best source for travel information about Poland. We'll be venturing forth soon to exciting sites around Poland and nearby. But today we're in Warsaw, and we're focusing on the Warsaw Old Town. We start at St. Anna's Church and talk about its significance and how Poland saved Europe twice. That's right, count it, twice. We'll be looking at some of the secrets of the old town, some of the stories and vignettes, and just two guys going for a walk on a sunny day. So stay with us on Poland Daily Travel. We're really glad you tuned in, because why do we do this? We do it for you. Stay with us.
Hi, it's Poland Daily Travel. My name's Will. You may not already know that if you've seen us before. If this is your first exciting episode, then let me tell you where we are. We're standing on the edge of the old town, on one of the highest points in Warsaw, right above the beautiful Vistula River, or Wisła River, as they pronounce it in Polish, but Vistula to the rest of the world. How about the view from here? What do we see from here? We see Praga and the famous church with the two steeples, blue steeples. Way down there is the stadium, and it's a kind of a smoky, misty afternoon. Good Lord.
Okay,
what are we
so,
looking at here?
Yes, let's start from the beginning.
Yeah.
We are on a scarp right next to Vistula River, which is our longest river, 1,047 kilometers, more or less 700 miles, crossing our country throughout. But our country is not that long, so the river is sort of squeezed into the shape of S letter,
Right.
so that it goes through Krakow, our previous capital, then Warsaw, and then in Gdańsk it reaches the Baltic Sea. These are very good places to visit, Krakow, Warsaw and Gdańsk.
You forgot Torun.
And Torun, where
Yeah.
Nikolai Copernicus was born, the guy who said the Earth planet goes around the sun, and much more cities right next to Vistula River. On the other side of the river, indeed, Praga district, once upon a time separate city. Probably first settlement of this area was over there in Praga, and then on this side of the river. In late 1700s, it became one city, Warsaw, with the district of Praga. By the way, not confused with Praga in Czech Republic. Probably in these old Slavian languages, Praga means next to the river. That's why Praga in Czech Republic was a city next to the river, and this city was next to the river, and that's why similar, actually the same names. In the distance, yes, we can see the church with these two towers. It's Saint Florian's Church. It's a Gothic style, it's a neo-Gothical structure that we can see over there, constructed in late 1800s, thanks to our mayor of the city, Socrates Starenkiewicz, Russian
Socrates.
guy. Socrates.
I know him as Socrates.
Exactly.
I didn't know he was alive in the 19th century.
He was alive like 3 centuries.
He's alive in our minds.
He's alive in our minds,
words.
and Socrates is
this is a
claimed
different
to be.
one.
Yeah, no, he was doing exactly what we are doing at the moment. Socrates
He was talking?
Yes, he was
About
walking and
Wisła
talking.
River?
Socrates was walking and talking.
You mean the original one?
He didn't write a thing. All his students, mostly Platon, were writing, but not
Plato,
Socrates.
Plato, we say.
Exactly, we
In-
say
in
Plato.
English. Platon in Polish.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and Socrates.
Pluto, if you like Disney.
No, we are not watching. Of course, if you like Pluto, then he might also bring us some very important philosophy
But anyway,
in our lives.
to cut to the chase, before I took you off the subject, you were saying that an important figure was called Socrates.
Starenkiewicz. He was the longest lasting mayor of Warsaw for 17 years. He was a mayor of Warsaw, and thanks to him, many buildings were constructed in the city. He made streets wider, cleaner. He put first green areas next to the streets. He established Brudnowski Cemetery and constructed a church over there that was made of wood used for the reconstruction of the Sigismund's column before, so he was modernizing our Polish stuff. Even
That's
though
the big cemetery that away.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
He was a very good Russian guy for us, for Poland.
So
And-
not all Russians were evil. And what about Filtrova? Did he do that as well?
And he did Filtrova as well.
There you go.
So Polish.
We talked about that in a previous episode.
You know, it was not that
Somebody else.
easy to convince stubborn Warsawians to have water in their stops, in their flats. Because when you are not used to having water in your flat, then why someone is convincing you to dig all the city throughout so to deliver sewer and water system to your flats?
Yeah, but if Starinkiewicz had not dug those canals, then they would have had, the resistance would have had nowhere to hide and travel about during World War II.
Starinkiewicz
So
was
in fact,
amazing.
the Russians helped to give the Nazis a hard time.
Starinkiewicz made it a modern agglomeration. First tram system, Hala Mirowska, Hala Gwardii, Hala Koszyki, all these places are known by Warsawians very well. This is where we hang out
Because
now.
of Mr. Starinkiewicz.
And these buildings were constructed in Warsaw so to regulate street marketing
But why
in the
are we
city.
talking about him standing right here again?
Well, Poland Daily Travel, we always have reasons for conversations.
Yeah, where the conversation never stops. Stick with us. We'll be right back. We're standing by the... Look, you know what? Aren't there beaches here in the summer?
Can you see the one over there?
Yeah.
It's called La Playa, and this is where we hang out.
Okay.
And it's not
In the
only
summer.
us over there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it'd be nice.
You know what I mean?
See a few nice ladies.
Oh
even.
yeah. Well, I didn't say it out loud.
Yeah, I think even Napoleon liked Poland. Anyway, we'll be right back. We're going to keep looking out over the river. Poland Daily Travel. We are walking back on our back up to the Old Town Square on our marathon walk through the Old Town of Warsaw. And I don't know that I've ever walked this extensively through the Old Town and talked about so many things. I've probably walked by this hundreds of times, and I've never actually realized until right now that this is
original. Not
Yeah.
destroyed during World War II. And
Yeah.
have you ever thought why this entrance is so big?
No. I mean, what was... It looks like they were putting some big vehicles or something in there. Is that right?
Well, vehicles used over there were called horses.
Oh, they were putting horses in there?
Horses and granaries.
You
So
mean you're talking
stables
about
and
pre-motorized motorcycles?
Well, exactly.
Or cycles.
Yes. So
without wheels.
HORSES.
Okay.
4 legs.
Glad you spelled that, so I didn't get confused.
Okay, so we are having stables, we are having granaries in here, people are keeping grain. So no windows this way of regular flats and apartments, only windows this way directed to the main market square. And by the way, you are paying taxes according to these windows and the number of them and the access to the light.
Yeah, if your window, access to light?
Yeah.
So it's how many windows, but how many windows means more access to light. So you're being taxed for your sunlight.
This is exactly how it was in all Europe. This is how it worked like.
That's ridiculous.
No, this is how it was.
Yeah, I've heard
If
that
you wanted
before.
to show off, you were constructing yourself a lot of windows, so to show everyone that you have so much money that you can pay big taxes.
So, but, okay, right. But what is the logic behind taxing people for windows? The very fact that you can build windows means that you can afford a bigger house? Or why didn't do it by square meters or something like that?
Well, if we had a possibility to go back in time and ask them, then maybe we would be given an answer. But you know, that was the tradition of these days. You were paying taxes according to the access to the
time
life.
machine's waiting over there.
Huh? Okay.
The time machine's around the corner. I didn't tell you. We have a time machine. We're going to go back and ask him. But no, it's not written down anywhere? You never read that? I'm just curious.
Well, I am curious as well. Let's go to the Museum of History of Warsaw and check it out.
Really? I think we need to call Dr. Know-It-All.
And it's a very nice museum in the central section of the main market square, and that you can sightsee on everyday basis.
That's a nice museum.
And that's the modernized one, so let's take a look.
Okay, let's go. Hey, stick with us. We're going on a further walk.